Got some people logged in already. It's 4 people, but there's 4 people here. All right, cool. Great. Well, welcome everyone. My name is SJ. I lead content and social here at GEM. And I'm happy to be having this amazing conversation with 2 talent leaders. And I'll let them have the floor to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I can go ahead and kick it off. My name is Nathalie Grandy. I currently lead talent acquisition globally at a company called Linktree.
Great. Hi, all. My name is Tony, Tony Lee. I am been a head of talent acquisition and recruiting operations for, I don't know, longer than I want to admit. So someone else can do the math. But yeah, I actually just wrapped up a role with Mission Cloud, and which was acquired by CDW. So very excited to be here.
Great. And as people are logging into this conversation, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're logging in from. And as a quick little icebreaker, wanted to ask, what's the most recent concert you've been to? Bay Area, right? Oh, nice. Oh, 9 Inch Nails. Awesome. Great. Nice. We've got people coming in from all over. That's amazing. Oh, nice, Natalie. Metallica, okay. And YouTube's a great resource for live concerts. I watch Outside Lands from here. So, well, not from where I am right now, but from home. Okay, awesome. Great. So, as we begin our conversation, I wanted to give a quick introduction to what we'll be discussing today. Everyone here knows that intake docs are important, and during this session, we'll discuss how the best recruiters build intake docs that reach the right candidates, and how to walk into your next kickoff like the strategic partner you are. Feel free to drop in questions in the Q&A anytime. We'll save time to answer those questions at the end of our session, and then we'll have quick 2 polls throughout today. And so we'll actually start with our first poll here, and that is, how do your intake meetings usually go? And if you want to find the poll, it's in the tab next to our chat. You'll see like a red dot there. All right. Looks like we have some answers across the board here. I'm glad to see less of us are having intake docs as a struggle. Cool. And if you want to share in the chat as well, what's the one thing that often derails you during your intake meetings? Feel free to share that in the chat. Cool. Natalie, I wanted to ask, how do you feel about what derailed you in your intakes meeting in the past? And Tony, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, no, and this has always been such a pain point in the struggle that we've been trying to get right for years. And I feel like we've been able to really hone in on everyone's expertise from various different companies. The biggest thing for us is when, especially in a fast-paced environment, you have hiring managers that are either very new or they're really looking to get this person backfilled so quickly or get that person, hired really fast. And so they tried to bypass some of those steps. And we've had interviewers or hiring managers say, just get the job posted. We'll figure it out the process afterwards. And I think that's what's really set us up for a lot of failure, because we were running into issues where the interview team didn't feel as calibrated, or we didn't feel as recruiters as calibrated with the hiring manager on the scope and the extent of what they were looking for. And so for us, it was really reminding them, hey, like, let's slow down. Let's take 1 or 2 weeks, really understand, what is this person going to be doing? Do we understand the levels, and does this match in terms of responsibility to the internal level, so that we are obviously going to be hiring the right person, we're going to be paying them appropriately. And then what are those non-negotiables that we want to look for, and making sure everyone is aligned across the board. And one of the ways that we've actually done this, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later as well, is for such a global team, I have my hiring managers now actually record a loom that we then send to the hiring teams, so that it says, hey, this is what we're looking for. Here's how we want to think about evaluating this candidate. And here's what the scope of their work is going to look like.
Yep, definitely +1 on that. I was answering the question in chat, and for me, it's very similar. It's like they're new, and so they don't know what to do, or they're usually experienced, and so they're like, they think they know everything. And I think that's the challenge in recruiting, right? Is everyone's an expert, but they're not. And so how do you find that balance of being that partner where you are the expert, but apparently so are they? And so, I think for me, the biggest challenge really is not the doc itself. It's just getting started, and I think we'll dig in this later, but just the challenge of, I compare it to like trying to create a Google slide or a PowerPoint. Is the hardest part is just getting started. And so I think the goal that Natalie's mentioning and in general is help them get started, get them halfway or do some of the work for them. And so that way the conversation's easy, not the actual like writing it down part.
I love that. And that's actually something I've told my recruiters over the last couple of years. It's like, give them something to react to. Don't just tell them, hey, you need to create a process doc or you need to create a job description. Give them something that they can react to. It's a lot easier to get things accomplished that way. So that's such a good point, Tony.
Yeah. Awesome. And I wanted to know, what was one search in your experience that went wrong? And when you look back, what was the actual moment during that process where it broke down?
I can start with that one. It was a couple companies ago, and the search was for an account executive. We were a SaaS company. We are looking for $1 million quota carrying, software technical salesperson. And everyone on the panel were experts. Like, I have such a huge network and referrals, and we don't need this meeting, and I know what I'm looking for. And I think 3 weeks in, we had everyone had different feedback. Everyone was looking for different things, and by the time we got to the final stage for like half a dozen candidates, like they all bombed out, or one person loved them, one person didn't, but they were looking for different things. And so sometimes I feel like I have to let the team fail to then be like, great, that's why we needed the intake meeting. Let's start over. And so we did. And then from that point on, everyone was looking for the same thing. But yeah, that was kind of I don't know, we had to hire 60 account executives in like under 90 days. And it was just, I knew it was going to go terribly wrong. So I let it and then restarted.
Yeah, for us, it was actually a little bit more recent. We had someone that was hiring for this kind of like head of social role. And, that looks so different at so many different companies. And I think they had a vision in their head of what that person was going to be doing. And then when they wrote the job description, we were reviewing it prior to the kickoff meeting. I was like, this seems like it's the role of 3 people that you currently have on your team. Like, have we actually differentiated what those swim lanes are going to look like? Because if we don't button in exactly what this person is going to be doing and how we're going to evaluate them, we're going to bring them on board under false pretenses. They're going to be really disappointed with the scope of their role. And then you're going to have these 3 other people on this team really frustrated that someone's now stepping on their toes. And so it's making sure that you're looking at not only the gaps that are existing on the team today, but how does that then impact everyone else's role?
Totally. Yeah, I think misalignment is one of like the biggest things that will come up during this process. And where do you, like, as recruiters, what do you think alignment looks like versus what it actually will look like once you're doing the intake doc and the process?
I mean, alignment to me is, I think about the business goals, like what's the desired outcome? Desired outcome is you need to get a hire. And for me, it's like, what's the metrics in the middle, and not just for like recruiters, like time to fill or time between stages or whatnot, but then from an interview perspective, like how many interviews is it taking? How much time are you putting into this? Did you just waste 20 hours this week of your team's time interviewing the wrong candidate? And so I try to build that, or take historic data, or just make sure that that's apparent up front. Like, there's no way you're going to backfill this role in the 2-week notice that you have for this person. So let's spend that time to figure out exactly what you're hiring for, who's interviewing for what are the things you're looking for. But then more so than anything else, like, how do we talk about these candidates in a consistent way? Like, you can't ask them different questions, 10 different candidates, 10 different questions. So how do we benchmark the answers across the board? And so those are the kind of things in intake is like, why I think alignment's important is, what are we interviewing for? What are we asking? What are we evaluating for? What's a hire look like in this situation?
That's such a good point. And it's interesting because I think a lot of hiring managers like, yeah, the team knows what they're looking for. They have access to the doc, and it's one thing to align with the hiring manager and make sure that you two are, very much buttoned up on what you're looking for, but then making sure your interviewers know exactly what they should be, asking and how to evaluate a good versus a mediocre answer. And sometimes they're just afraid to say, hey, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. We actually had an instance recently, and it was, we used MetaView. And so we were recording our interviews, and we were sitting down 2 weeks, into this surge. And I shared it with our hiring manager, and he's like, wait, all 3 of our interviewers just asked the same question. And I was like, exactly. This is why it is so important to make sure that your interview team is really buttoned up and they are actually following the process. Otherwise, we're going to miss out on evaluating for the really important criteria that's going to differentiate a really great candidate versus someone that we're like, I think I like them. And then making sure that we are really looking for someone that is going to fill those needs as well. And so just constantly going back, constantly making sure the interview team knows, hey, these are the questions, these are the competencies we should be looking for, and here's how to assess for it.
I have a follow-up question is, not for you, but for anybody. It's like, so who owns prepping the interviewers? Is it the recruiter or is it the hiring manager? I know the answer, but I don't know if my hiring manager does.
No, totally. No, great insights. I wanted to get a little bit more practical here and help us talk about what a great intake doc looks like versus a bad one. What a bad one looks like. Feel free to chime in.
A bad one to me is the one that the hiring manager created themselves. It's funny because we got acquired, my last company, and so I had just switched from Lever to Gem ATS, but then in this acquisition they use Workday, and so I'm trying to make both live together. But in the fear of losing everything, I started downloading all of our scorecards, just to have it as ready and available, and like make it like a data bank. But I didn't realize how much I didn't QA all these older scorecards. And some of these scorecards had like 60 questions. I'm like, when would you ask all these questions? And so to me, a bad intake could be not enough information, or intake doc, not enough information, too much information, not actually trying to figure out like what it is you're hiring for. And so usually when I start a doc, the first section I have, like the first half page, is like a open text of why do you need this role? And then everything flows from there.
Yeah, we actually started embedding AI into a lot of this process as well. So we built out a template that when someone requests a new role, it does have the template and say, hey, FYI, expectation, this is expected to be done before the intake. We'll discuss and obviously work and collaborate back and forth on this. And to your point earlier, Tony, about like getting started, and I know that for me is always the hardest thing. If I'm given a deck that I need to create, it'll take me 2 hours before I even put anything on paper. It's just not the way my mind works. And so going back to that, give them something to react to. We actually have a database of all the competencies and questions that we've used over the years that we've done analysis on to make sure that they're actually addressing for the right things. We do a quality of hire exercise every single year to look at scorecards and performance and whether that maps. But we then built an AI bot in Glean where they could put in the level, the job title, and the competencies that they're looking to address, kind of the gaps on the team. And then it would spit out a JD and some questions based off of what we already had existing in our system. And that actually sped up our time to complete these IVPs or these spot docs by, gosh, like it was like 75%. I mean, we really just took that down to a few hours because it gave them something just to tweak. And that was a lot easier for them than starting from scratch.
I mentioned in prep, I'm going to say it again because I have to. I'm totally stealing that. I mean, the idea that you have a bot or even like something to just ask questions and they just answer it, because starting from scratch, impossible. Like giving them a template where it's like, why are you filling this role? Which copies do you want? What's your interview stages? Who's interviewing? Even that's like pulling teeth. And I think that's sometimes why the intake takes so long, is because they're secretly rescheduling or canceling because they haven't filled the doc out yet, and so yeah. I love the AI prompt. Just ask me questions and then we'll go from there.
Well, awesome. So we have a couple tips on building a strong intake doc, but there is a step most recruiters will rush past, and it's the one that determines whether your search actually surfaces the right people. So let's talk about defining your dream candidate and nailing your ICP. So wanted to ask y'all, how do you define your dream candidate in a way that's actually useful and not just a wish list?
My metaphor for this was I kind of treat it like my kid Santa wish list, which is great. Write down everything you want from Santa and then come back to like, great. If Santa can only give you 2 presents, what would it be? And so that's kind of how I look at intake as well. Is I can see why job descriptions are terrible, and I can see why sometimes they're like a catch-all bullet pointed forever list. And so just like the job description, I think it's our job to then have them articulate in, I think that's the important thing about intake doc is the intake meeting. I think you can't do one without the other in order to have true alignment on what you're trying to look for. Because then I'm going to question everything in the intake doc and the job description saying, great, I saw you wrote this. Or I saw, let's say for recruiter, I saw you wrote Workday, Greenhouse, Lever, and Ashby. It's like, well, which one do we use? And so let's hone in on, like, if it's an absolute must, then let's make sure that's the one that you want. Otherwise, you're going to have some crazy dropout. So yeah, start with the wish list, but then hone down on like, well, what do you really need?
I love that. And it's also showing them the data. I think that's been the really powerful piece for us. And so when they have something that is such a crazy wish list that we're like, okay, we don't actually think they know what the market looks like. And I think it's because a lot of the times you're reading on LinkedIn, you're reading in other sources, how many people are in the market looking for new opportunities. And it's like, that's great, but they're not always going to want to work for your company. They're not always going to be the best fit. They're not always going to want to do hybrid capacity or whatever the working environment looks like. And so we've actually been going live during the end of these intake sessions. We'll go into talent insights in GEM and we'll say, okay, cool. We're going to upload the job description and all these criteria. We're going to have you stack rank it. And let's go through live how many people actually exist, and then showing them the data, the migration of talent. Okay, you want someone on the West Coast? Great. Well, someone from Spotify who is a product designer doesn't actually sit in San Francisco. They sit in New York. So is that something that you're willing to kind of flex on if that's the ideal profile for you? And I'm using that just as an example, but it's been really interesting for them to be able to see those talent insights and then potentially start to loosen the reins on what is truly a non-negotiable versus kind of what is that nice to have.
Yeah, totally. It's being realistic about, right, the candidates that are available to you and what you're exactly looking for. And when you have such a specific ICP you're looking for, you want to make sure that someone's available for that. And how specific does an ICP need to be before you start sourcing? I know, Nathalie, if you want to take this, since you talked about GEM, which thank you for the plug. But yeah, what's that minimum bar there when you're sourcing?
Yeah, for us, we've been pretty firm on making sure that at least we've had that intake meeting. They've, recorded the loom that we've then put into the hiring channel with all the interviewers. We feel like if we were to put a candidate into process, they're going to be successfully, identified and interviewed and evaluated. That's kind of a non-negotiable because it also impacts the candidate experience, and that's something that we are just very protective of. So we say at least 80% of it. And then one of the things that we've also done using AI is we take the recording from the intake meeting, we take the job description, we put them into AI and say, knowing we are looking for this profile, compare these two. Do they actually align, and how challenging is going to be, or what are the gaps that we're going to run into? And what's been able to kind of been spit back out to us has been so fascinating to say, hey, this isn't going to be an impossible search, but it's going to be really challenging because at this level, someone is going to lean either this way or this way. They're not going to be completely in the middle of having both of these experiences, or they're not going to be as hands-on because they have been leading a team for 5 years. It's that whole concept of when, a couple of years ago, it's like, I need 20 years of social media experience. And you're like, well, it's only been out for 10 years. So where is those other remaining 10 years coming from? And then being realistic and kind of pushing back on them with that. And so I think, again, when you kind of couple that with the data that you're getting with the talent insights, the conversation that you're having and what you know about the talent market, and then also using AI to kind of back up a lot of these sentiments, that's where we've kind of had that aha and breakthrough moment with our hiring managers.
Yep, similar. I mean, I would say 80% too, which is like 100%, in my opinion, like, what are you looking for? What are the questions you want covered? What are the topics or the metrics or the goals that this person needs to be responsible for success? That needs to be defined. Usually where I say the 20% that can be flexible is the hiring team. It's like, if you don't know where the last person who's going to interview in this group, fine. But at the same time, the challenge is, but if you don't know your interview team and you add them at the last minute, well, then the challenge there is, well, do they know what they're looking for? And so actually Nathalie touched on something that she said earlier this week that I love, and I don't know why I never thought of it, but it's like, I know, but from like the alignment standpoint is, I think the biggest headache I have is, how do I get a half dozen people into a kickoff meeting and then half a dozen people into a debrief meeting? It's hard enough just to schedule them for one-on-one interview. And what Ali does, that she mentioned, was she has the manager record a loom or any video and then send it to the interviewers. And so I'm also copying that too. But yeah, so now my attitude is, if I can get the doc right, the expectations and the goals, and then have that manager verbalize it, I can then share that with the interview team. And then that would really create the alignment that we need. So for me, the doc needs to be 100% enough that the manager's comfortable talking about it in a video that I can then share with the entire interview group.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just to get a little bit more specific here, when you were thinking about like what a hiring manager says they want versus what the hiring manager actually wants, as recruiters, how do you close that gap?
Such a good question. I try to understand first, and we've kind of alluded to this a little bit, is like, what are you trying to solve for in this hire? And one of the things that we've run into in terms of issues is they'll kind of walk you through expectations. Oh, I want this person to own XYZ. I want them to have this media experience. I want them to have this autonomy. And you're like, great, well, you're asking for a 3, like, I'm not quite sure you're going to find someone for that level because they haven't been exposed to that type of work yet. So do you want someone that's a little bit more junior and is hungry and kind of fit into that category? Or are you looking for someone to kind of own this end to end and can be a lot more autonomous, because then maybe we need to kind of reset our expectations. And a lot of it is bringing example candidates to the table and saying, hey, this is someone that is maybe 90% of what you're asking for. Let's walk through it live and understand why or why not you would move forward with this. And one of the cool things that we've actually done even with MetaView too is you can input the job description and it'll record obviously the interviews, and then it can rank them and give them a score of how well their answers and their experience actually maps to the job description. And so we've actually gone back and tweaked the job description because we're like, this person meets 98% of what you're looking for, but they're not a fit because they're missing XYZ. It's like, okay, well, let's readjust that so we are attracting the right candidate.
What we do that I've never read on paper is similar to that, is trying to figure out like what role do you really want, and is can you actually hire for it, and if you're asking for everything in the kitchen sink. And so my motto usually is I actually secretly try to lower the bar so that we can raise the bar in the interview, because I think that managers already trying to like raise the bar too high. That's unfeasible. And so and even if it's a standard role, I think the question is, well, if I can't find that person, who's the alternative? And so we actually add that in the ICP of like, what are almost like an executive search, in the sense of like, what are the alternative markets? What's the alternative skill set? What's the alternative candidate? And so I'm not lowering the bar, but I'm just, opening the door to potentially other spaces. I think for me, it's important not just to necessarily have it written down. It's just have the conversation, because then it's in the hiring manager and the team's mind of like, okay, if I did find someone from retail for this SaaS role, but they had all the skill sets, like, am I open to that kind of experience? And so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily quote that lower the bar to raise the bar, but that's kind of how I approach it.
That's a good point too. It's like the 80-20 rule, going back to that earlier point too. It's like, sometimes they'll say, well, we need to hire this in 2 to 3 weeks. And you're like, great. Well, what you're asking for might take 6 months. Is that something that you're worth kind of trading off in terms of like getting that perfect person that could plug in, but it's going to take a lot longer? Or do you want someone that maybe has like 80% of those existing skills and the remaining 20% is the coachability, but we could get them in for you next month and you could teach them exactly what you need to get them productive before the alternative, which is potentially 6 months.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, being realistic, right, is probably the right way to go here. You want to make sure that if this is the right ICP, what's the realistic timeline of getting them hired, right? And through the interview process. And so once you've nailed your ICP, the next challenge is keeping alignment throughout the search. And hiring managers can change their mind, right? They're like, well, as both of you mentioned, it's like, yeah, I want this. And then you learn that ICP isn't there. It's like, okay, well, now I want this. And you're 2 interviews in with certain candidates and you haven't started the search on others. So I wanted to get into this. I want to get into like a hot topic right now, right? I want to talk to you about like what's aligned or what's not aligned or what's too early to tell throughout the alignment or throughout the hiring process. So I'm going to give y'all some scenario prompts, and you can decide whether you feel like this is aligned, not aligned, or if it's too early to tell in the process. Are we ready? Okay.
Oh boy.
Our first prompt. So the hiring manager says they want someone senior, but the comp band, and this is, let's say we're in a major metropolitan area like New York, San Francisco, right? So they say they want someone senior, but the comp band taps out at $110K. Are we aligned? Are we not aligned? What's going on?
Oh, that makes my heart stop a little bit. Definitely not.
It's like literally every day. I mean,
go ahead, Tony.
I mean, I'm gonna say I'm aligned in the sense like if we write the ICP for senior and like so here's the challenge is like there's multiple stakeholders here. So like me and the hiring manager are aligned. If you're writing the ICP and the job and everything in the notes, like if you're aligned on the expectations, what you're hiring for, what you're interviewing for, and what you're gonna hire, then sure, I will recruit for that. But at the same time, but if you're trying to sneak one past the goal through comp and HR, if you have those teams, it's like that's where you're definitely not aligned and you're gonna fail in the end. It's like there's more than just me and the hiring manager in this process. And so that's where I would say we're I guess high level, we're not aligned. Everyone has to be on the same page. Otherwise it's just never gonna happen. Or if you're trying to ask me to sell a senior role to at 110K to a candidate, then we're definitely not aligned. Like then you ask me to do something I know just won't work.
And you're not going to attract the candidates that you want. And you can kind of show them that. It's like, do you want someone that is willing to be completely underpaid for that role? You want to make sure that you are being very fair and you're thinking about internal parity. And it kind of goes back to that earlier point that I mentioned. It's like, okay, well, it sounds like what you're actually looking for is an L4 or like a senior, not an L3. So let's have that conversation. And also, to your point, Tony, it's like looping in finance and HR early and saying like, hey, this is actually the gap on the team. This is why we need to hire this type of person. These are the responsibilities they're going to have. What does flexibility in the budget look like? And if you have a strong relationship with your finance team, which we've been able to build here, we have the tracker and we know, hey, if we hire someone a little bit lower here, or if we hire someone with a lot of potential here that is lower on the comp bands or potentially like a level lower, okay, maybe we can flex and hire someone at a higher level or higher comp band over here because this is exactly what we need. And it's making sure everyone is in the loop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Well, and I would say, if you have a good ICP, then I would go back and be like, great, where in this ICP or where in your job description would you consider like what's mid, what's senior, and then I would throw it back at them saying, great, you said that this needs to be 8 years versus 5 years. If I found you someone 5 years, 110K, would you still say yes to them? But I mean, that's also building the case too. Like if you're not aligned on comp and level, but the hiring manager is not budging on the level, well, then you need evidence and supporting details to then make the case to get to the comp you want. And I can't tell you how many hiring managers, like especially in the AI world I'm trying to hire for in cloud, where they're like, well, can we just go talk to 10 candidates and then collect data? I'm like, you're wasting my time now. Like, so anyway, that's a different conversation.
No, absolutely. I think, and chat has totally agreed. I see some really great comments here. And everyone is, I think the chat is aligned with y'all, and we'll go to our second scenario here. So say you leave the kickoff with a full intake doc, you think you're ready to start your search for a candidate, and then the hiring manager just keeps changing the requirements after every slate. Are you aligned?
I just paused the wall.
What was that?
Sorry. I just stopped recruiting. I mean, I don't know how anyone else feels. I mean, but yeah, sorry. I just had to put that out.
No, I love it. It's the honest, raw thoughts. I mean, I've definitely done that where I'm like, okay, I feel like we don't know what we're actually looking for. Like, let's pause for a week or two. Let's realign, and understand like maybe where we missed the mark when we were doing this kickoff. Like, what is prompting you to want all these extra things? And is this maybe even a potentially like a second role that you're now looking for? But I agree. It's reducing the noise and the messiness and just saying, take a moment. We're just going to step back. We're just going to stop here for a second.
Totally not aligned. Yeah. I mean, that's where I also, I think the hardest thing in recruiting is building trust. And so if you have the partner or the manager or the leader or the HR person that you can work with, I'm usually the bad guy. Like I play that role in the sense of like, great, I will tell that manager and their boss that we're pausing this role. And that you need to go meet them again. So that way the recruiter still has the ability to connect with that hiring manager saying, great, how do we fix this? But I don't want them to necessarily make that call and then now the hiring manager's pissed off at them. So I think there's definitely a partnership here that we need to figure out how to get realigned on what we're hiring for. It's
such a good point. And that's actually something I've been doing with my team as well, is we do a bi-weekly weather report that we then send out to all the hiring managers and ELT that talks about our wins, our challenges, our asks, and just gives them more visibility into sourcing, what's blocking us, just so that there is more of that full 360. And it's not meant to call anyone out. It's meant to say, hey, these are the challenges that we're running into because it's taking 3 or 4 days to fill out a scorecard, which is added, 10, 12 days to our entire process. And therefore, that's why we are missing out on these candidates, or we've had 20% drop out because we're not moving fast enough, or comps misaligned on this thing. And it gets them thinking because they're seeing these challenges with other hiring teams as well. And it allows them to kind of internally reflect on how that might be impacting their own processes.
No, all great. Notice how all of these kind of track back to something that could have been caught earlier in the process. So speaking of which, I wanted to introduce our second poll, which is, where does your intake process break down the most? And chat, feel free to answer in the chat if you have any additional comments. And as we fill out the poll, Tony, Natalie, I wanted to ask you both, like, what are the most common patterns that you're seeing where the intake process typically breaks down?
For us,
Honestly,
Go
sorry.
ahead. We feel so passionately about this.
I know. I mean, my answer really is just it's the person, not the doc. And so what breaks down is the person committing to the process or showing up to the meeting or taking it seriously or being prepared. Like if I do all the work for you, well, then I'm actually hiring the person you want, and that's kind of the issue I usually run into with where it breaks down. So, so then I play the game of, well, great, I'll wait for you, and that's probably not a good game to play. And then we're like 3 weeks in, and it's like, hey, why haven't we kicked this off yet? I'm like, I'm still waiting for you. So again, not a good answer. But in a land of 50 recs and 4 recruiters, it's like, well, I'm going to move on to the role that's hiring fastest.
I agree. It's probably not always like the best approach, but I've gone to hiring managers and say it's taken a week to get any sort of update from you. If we don't get something within the next 24, 48 hours, it's going to help us like unblock and get these things live. I'm going to have to pull my recruiter and put them on another role where that's ready to go and we can actually drive impact. Because if they're slowing down their part, they're going to actually have like a downward effect on all the other like P0 or P1 roles that have just as much of a priority, but maybe we've deprioritized in favor of this one hiring manager or in favor of this one role.
But I mean, let's say the doc is done, and then like one of my issues then, and I think for me it is keeping them. I don't know. Hiring teams are so funny. It's like they kind of, even if you get totally prepared, they still do whatever they want, which is sometimes super annoying. And so in the sense of like, well, I really like this conversation with Bob and Jane, and they had this experience. Now I want this now this is kind of a requirement now. I'm like, great. So one, yet keeping them aligned, and then two, when knowing the signals to re-qualify or just pause. Like the example earlier was they're going all over the place. I just stopped the recruiting. I think sometimes there's small signals where it's like, hey, we need to pause for just a second. We need to meet and say, hey, these things came up. Are they now requirements? Are they not requirements? Like, what are your expectations? And let's communicate that to the team. So I think readjusting slightly is important mid-process. I think the one thing that's really hard to do sometimes, and what I've done is assign coordinators to do this, if the recruiters are too busy, is read all the feedback. It's hard, especially if you have a lot of candidates, but the feedback then helps me figure out, are we aligned or not?
Awesome. And it's great we're talking about alignment. I feel like this is a consistent theme for good reason. But let's dive deeper into into alignment. And I wanted to ask y'all, what's the one thing you feel like hiring managers always get wrong about what they're actually looking for?
Well, that is a head scratcher. For me, I think it's been years of experience. Sometimes they anchor too much on, I need 10 years of experience plus, but then they miss out on all these candidates who have potentially worked in startup environments or maybe in scrappier environments and had to do a lot of this and have built up that level of expertise and are overperforming at, say, 5 years of experience than someone who may be working at a different industry or a different stage company and doing this for 10 years, thinking about the potential of it. Is someone willing to roll up their sleeves and just like get down and dirty into the weeds and really like fix these problems and address these things? I've had candidates hiring managers where they're like, but they're not senior enough. And it's like, but they've been doing this work. And so do you care more about how long they've been doing for, or exactly like what their accomplishment, and do you have the metrics and the examples to back that up?
Yeah, I'm gonna double down on that and stretch a little bit in like not just years of experience, but did they come from Facebook? Did they come from Google, like their last company? Hopefully no one runs this now. When I started more than I'm not gonna say how many years, a long time ago, everyone, the main thing that people were asking for is, do they come from a Ivy League school? I'm looking for someone from Stanford or MIT. I'm like, but why? I like to think that question hasn't come up for me often lately, degree or school, but I think that bias is still there though, of like, well, they came from Meta, they have to be great. I'm like, are you sure? And so the last couple companies I've been trying to focus more on skills versus skills and behavioral experience, but not necessarily like actual experience necessarily. Because a good example is where I'm at is a AWS partner company. And for years in the beginning, we tried to steal Amazon people, but then the challenge was they cost too much or their equity was too high. But then once they got there for a 200-person startup, they're like, they just couldn't, the pace and wearing the many hats just wasn't working. So we started saying, don't hire him from AWS, even though our entire ecosystem is based on AWS. And then the last year, all of a sudden it's like, hey, I have 6 referrals from AWS. They've laid off like 20,000 people. And so it's just, so I had to pull back saying, great, what are the skills you're looking for? What, and how do they use those skills? And let's focus on that and make those the questions.
Awesome. Well, I know we talked about this earlier in our conversation today, but I wanted to talk a little bit, switching subjects. Let's talk about AI in the intake process. How are you both utilizing AI during that part of hiring, and how, like in what spaces, and how are you working with hiring managers to use it as well?
Everything.
It's so powerful. And like I mentioned earlier, being able to kind of create that bot, and it's so interesting because I am not a technical person. Sometimes you'll say something that goes right over my head. And with the introduction of AI, obviously there was so much hesitation about, you know, what this was going to look like. Is it going to steal our jobs? How accurate is it? And it's like, if you use it in the right ways, there's so many TikToks, trainings, courses, and peers internally that you can learn from. Our IT director is such an AI wizard. And so I went to him and I said, hey, here's our challenges. How do we automate this? And this is where, even in Slack, we just get so many questions. How do I find this? How do I find that? I'm like, oh my goodness, I've shared this 15 times with you. And so we started to take a look and we were like, okay, in the Ask Talent channel, let's have the automated bot pull from our Notion docs or our Google Docs and answer the question for them. And then if there needs to be an escalation point, like we're there. And so optimizing some of those inefficiencies. Again, taking the transcripts from, say, the last 3 interviewers are taking, and I'm going to plug Jen because I love this feature, in the scorecards, how it has like the AI summarization at the top, being able to say, here are the strengths, here are the gaps, and here's the contradictions. Okay, let's take a look at this for all 3 candidates or all 5 candidates. You know, how, again, does this map against one another in terms of like skill sets? How should we be thinking about evaluating it? For us, a lot of it came down to hiring managers having like this decision paralysis and not feeling confident in their decision to hire the right person because they were getting so much pressure from the executive team to hire that perfect person. And reminding them, you're the subject matter expert within your field. I'm the subject matter expert in my field. So let's work together to figure out exactly what you need. And then being able to take that, put it into either MetaView or into ChatGPT and saying, let's evaluate these candidates. Let's look at their resumes. Let's understand the gaps. Do we see any trends? And how do we then adjust our hiring process to be a little bit more effective to find that right person, or to even just like articulate to our executive team why we feel so confident in these skill sets?
Yeah, I'm looking at AI. So after a year now of like, so here's my brain works with like ATS and tools and all this stuff, and TA technology is, what's the one thing I can give everybody? You know, like, is it LinkedIn Recruiter? Is it Find Them? Is it Seek Out? And what I've learned over the decade plus is that recruiter is going to use what they, if you force them to use something that they're not comfortable with, then the challenge is they either will not use it at all, or not recruit as good because they feel like they have to click these extra buttons to make sure they get their pay and their bonus or whatever. And so, I mean, there's some things you just have to do as a team, but your process is all different. And so I have some recruiters who love sourcing, and I have some recruiters who love applicant flow, and I don't push one or the other to do more than the rest, and different companies do different things. But so for me over the last year, my attitude has been, if I can give you the foundation of the tools, what can you build in your workflow what's your workflow look like, and where can you can you tweak it? And so we have MetaView for note taking. Some invited to its intake calls, and it takes all the notes for them, and they just have a discussion. Some still like their doc, and they use the script for the doc. They still have the note taker, and they compare the two things. We have Gem ATS that does AI sourcing, but also AI ranking. And so some recruiters love sourcing, so they use that, and they say it's it looks like LinkedIn Recruiter, but it works better. And then some are really good at social media posting, getting referrals, going to hosting webinars with their team, and they attract hundreds of people. And then they use AI to then figure out, well, based on my notes and my MetaView notes or my BrightHire notes or my handwritten notes and my job description, I'm going to upload that into Gem, and then it'll tell me, hey, these are the top 10 matches for you. And so they'll use that pipeline. Scheduling, I think, is huge. I would not say call scheduling AI, but automation and it recommending when to schedule for you is like a must, in my opinion. If any of you are still playing calendar Tetris, I'm so sorry. But for me, the big thing for me too is actually what I started doing is when everyone's like, use AI. Everyone should be using AI. The company is using AI. How to use it in recruiting? Actually, one day I was just like freaked out. I'm like, okay, ChatGPT, how should I use AI in recruiting? And it was just like, have you ever talked to your dog, and have you ever said to yourself, like, if my dog could talk, the things it would say? And so that's my ChatGPT right now, is like the things that if anyone asked ChatGPT, what's your conversation's been like with Tony, it would just be terrible. But it's been giving me advice on like, here's your workflow. Here's where I think you could use Zapier, or you could use this tool. And so the nice thing is that it's not telling me to buy it. It's telling me like, I've seen these trends happening. Have you thought about this process change? But please don't ask my ChatGPT to tell me what, because it wasn't happening. It asks you a lot of follow-up questions, and so you end up talking about like stuff that's not recruiting related. So my ChatGPT knows way more about me than it should.
That's what I said. They're going to start charging on usage, and I was like, I need to stop asking it ridiculous questions because like it's getting a little out of control, and I'm going to be charged.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
So
I mean, as a content marketing manager, you can only imagine how many blogs are surfaced on my cloud projects. And so AI has changed the way I work. And after demoing Gem, right, like I've seen the way it's transformed for recruiters. Shameless plug. But I've seen the way our AI sourcing product will just take like silver medalists from over 800 million profiles, which is amazing to see because you would have to go in and do that search manually, right? And then for AI app review, right? Instead of having to sort through all of those application review, AI changes that whole process for recruiters by just ranking the top applications that come in. So you don't have to look through every single one of those applications. And lastly, I have searched what my dog would say to me, Tony. But I have come to a conclusion that the only thing he says to me is, may I have a pup cup? That is it. There are no other questions asked by my dog. And we're getting toward the end of our conversation here, so I wanted to ask y'all some rapid fire questions. So feel free to answer this with like single sentence, 3 words, whatever works best for you. And for those in the chat, feel free to also answer these questions as well. And the first question I have for y'all is, what is the one question every recruiter should be asking in every kickoff that most aren't?
What's I always tell them, why this role? Like, why would someone want to work here? Why would they be excited about this role? Like, what is the hook? And then we actually use that then to insert into our sourcing messages. And we saw an increase from 18% interest rate up to 40% interest rate when we were like, hey, this is why this role is so cool. And this is how it differentiates from other roles that you're going to see that are comparable on LinkedIn or at other companies. And that's kind of been a really surprising game changer for us. And we've been A/B testing those messages, and we've seen a massive uptick.
The one question every recruiter should ask, in my opinion, especially during kickoff, is it got brought up just because some of my hiring managers, like someone left that was like a critical part, or like, let's be honest, like most of your hiring right now, I mean, this year's a little different depending on where you are. I'm starting to see more net new roles, but if for the last year or two, the trend I've been seeing is most of your hiring has been attrition. And so And so the question that came up when we were hiring slowly in some cases was, if we don't hire this role, this will happen. And so then I'm like, great, from now on, I'm going to make that part of the question of every intake. If we don't hire this role, what's the fallout? Or what are you losing? Or what breaks? And I've had one or two conversations where like they said nothing. I'm like, well, then why are you hiring this role? But in most of the time, it's like, hey, we will lose $1 million in revenue on the sales side, or our timeline on shipping that release schedule we're gonna have to push it back 3 weeks if we can't hire by X date. So, and that's good though. I mean, I think in a call with a candidate, I mean, that's important. It's like, hey, I need you because. So anyway, that's
I love that. We're actually stealing that. We just implemented that this week. It's like, what is the fallout of not hiring this, and making sure that hiring managers can really articulate to the rest of the business that role might be a priority over everyone else. Because I think everyone is like, my role is number one. And you're like, okay, well, let's actually think about this, how it kind of interweaves with the rest of the business. Is this truly like the most important role for marketing, or do we need this role in engineering? Because if we don't get that, then it's going to impact revenue this way, or it's going to push back those timelines, to your point, Tony, by 3 weeks. And then maybe this person in marketing is going to be impacted if we don't have this person first. So just helping them see like the bigger picture.
Yeah. Once upon a time, it's probably pre-COVID, I used to do cost per hire, but also cost per vacancy, because the challenge was I needed more team to hire quicker and on time. Lately, most of my finance teams don't care if I hire on time or not. They're like, great, you just saved me $50,000 in salary expense. But the finance may feel that way, the business may not. And so I think that's also important to differentiate, like, who cares about what.
Yeah, that's a great metric, cost per vacancy. I don't think I've heard of that before. But then again, I'm not a recruiter. Okay, my second rapid fire question for y'all is, what's the first thing someone listening today should change about how they run their next kickoff?
I'm going to steal Nathalie's thought earlier, which is if you can somehow create a form or an AI questionnaire to create your intake doc. I think A, that's important. And then B, if you can have that manager record a video, if you're struggling with getting everyone in the same room, virtually or in person at the same time, then don't let that be your barrier for starting. Like, simplify it, record something, get the information out there. And if you're not using AI for note taking, then you're easily a year behind, honestly. Like, at this point, MetaView and BrightHire offer free accounts for you. Just go use it.
Oh, it's been the biggest game differentiator for us. It was actually a very funny transition, though, because at the beginning, even our hiring managers and us, I mean, we've been taking notes for way too long as recruiters. I also don't want to share the age, but we didn't know what to do with our hands anymore. And so we were just sitting there and we feel like we're staring into our candidates' souls. Like, it's very uncomfortable, and we had to kind of retrain our brain a little bit. But it helped actually catch a lot of the context that even as we were processing and just kind of trying to be present in the interview, wasn't able to do.
Yeah, that is awesome. And if you could redo one search, knowing what you know now, which search would it be and why?
You know what's funny, audience, is that we prep for all this stuff and then I still don't know the answer.
It changes every other day.
It does. If I could redo one search, knowing what I know today, I would say probably almost every executive search I've ever done. I think that's still very old school. Just think about executive search, especially if you use a firm, is like a law office or a hospital. Everything's just the system feels old, the process feels slow. You care about. I just don't feel like we use enough data or enough skills to focus on the thing we want to hire. We're just so focused on the persona or the last company or am I friends with them, and so if I could redo the search now, I would probably use AI or ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or whatever to help me build an executive case or get the deals I want. Or I've been seeing a lot of my recruiters upload or connect all their emails. Like, here's my emails from my hiring manager. Here's my emails from my executive. Here are the candidates. Here's the feedback. If I want, can you pretend to be that person? And I'm going to ask you questions. And so I think that's how I would redo search now, is like, not just try to figure out what you're trying to hire for, know who it is that they're going to report to, and can you index on making sure that your hire gets past that person, or you're solving that person's problem. So hopefully that was helpful. That was kind of a tangent of a thought.
I would probably redo most of my searches. And I think a lot of it is because as you go through these really challenging searches and as the recruiting industry is consistently changing, I mean, you used to look at job hoppers as, oh my gosh, don't touch them, and now with a lot of the layoffs and the redundancies and the shift to AI, having to remind hiring managers like, hey, this is just unfortunately our new normal. Like, let's dig into this and let's not, exclude those candidates. And I've been through those as well. So I always kind of come with my own little personal bias around it. But I would also say, having the confidence and trusting your gut, as a recruiting professional, you've been in this industry for years. You've seen the changes. You're talking to candidates. If you feel like something is off, raise that to your hiring manager. Don't sit on it. Like, bring those conversations up early, build that trust, raise these flags, or even just use your team to gut check, being like, I feel like I'm constantly seeing XYZ, or you seeing that in your pipelines. Let's compare it to past pipelines. One of the things that we implemented is an annual quality of hire exercise. And so we take the top performers from the company, the bottom performers from the company, and then I look at all of their scorecards anonymously. So my recruiters are out of this, but we keep it very narrow, and we take a look at how did they perform in the interview process and how are they performing in the company, and were we assessing for the right things, or did they come in with all strong yeses and they're really struggling in XYZ because we asked the same question 4 times, or we didn't dig into these things, or bias was kind of interjected into the process, and making sure that you're always going back and changing the questions and being open to adjusting your process as the market changes.
I like that.
Amazing. Well, we have a few minutes left, so we're going to move on to QA here. And we only have one question in QA at the moment, but chat, if you want to add a question, please add them to the Q&A tab of the chat here. And the one question we have is, I like the idea of having the hiring manager create a Loom video for the recruiting team. Can you give more details on what exact information you expect them to provide that is different from the intake doc and the meeting?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And for us, the intake doc is sometimes just between recruiting and hiring manager. And then you have the process doc, which is a little bit more visible to the hiring team, that talks about the competencies and the specific questions and has the JD. For us, we're like, keep it under 5 minutes. Talk about what this person is going to do in the 30, 60, 90 days. What gaps are they going to be filling? What does this role look like in 12 or 18 months? And how are they going to collaborate with their cross-functional peers? And then what constitutes like strong answers versus poor ones? And that kind of just allows interviewers to think about the questions that they're asking from the process doc, how the hiring manager envisions this. And it also gives 2 to 3 bullet points of what's exciting about this role? How do we want to sell them on this? And then it makes sure that the communication is very much aligned between each of the different interviewers. And if they have questions, they can kind of follow up async based off of that video. But we've done it now for a couple weeks, and the response from interviewers has just been so overwhelmingly positive. And I think it's something that we didn't realize we needed.
If MetaView or Brihire are on the call, I mean, that just makes me think like, if you're summarizing my notes, can you make a highlight video for me? Maybe that would from the intake meeting. I think that's a feature that doesn't exist yet. And if it doesn't exist, make sure someone pays me for it. But but that'd be cool though if the note taker that's recording the video could make a highlight video for you. Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, what was it? Would it be like a MetaView wrapped every interview? Be kind of sweet.
Yeah.
Not the right branding though, because it's not their branding, but something like that. All right, so we have 1 minute left. And so I'm going to ask a fun question. And this is not on our prep doc, so bear with me. In 3 words, What does a hiring manager need to give you to get a successful hire? Or to get you a successful hire?
Commitment is one, like the commitment accountability piece. They need to put as much effort into the process as we do, to kind of create that strong partnership. They need to get us succinct. I know this is not more than 3 words. I tend to talk. Succinct examples of what they're looking for, and then follow through.
Availability,
Mm.
patience,
Ooh.
and I don't know, be nice. I know it's 2 words, but I don't know.
Kindness.
Yeah, kindness. There you go. Most of our hiring managers are very nice, but it's always just that one that just drives you, or 2 that drives you bananas. And so, we're in this together.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks y'all for joining me in this discussion today. It was amazing to have you here. And I want to thank everyone who attended. I hope you got some really great insights. But thanks all.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right.